This is a difficult book to outline, but what I've done is I've combined the outlines of Hudson Taylor's little book, Union and Communion, John Phillips, and Lehman Strauss's ideas. I thought of all the stuff I read, and I just read a lot this week. In fact, I told Bonnie I can't see the Best Buy sign from the highway. I read so much this week. And that's pretty bad when you can't see that big looming yellow sign unless I squint. That's a sign I read a lot. But I combine those three, and I think it comes out nice. Number one, the characters introduced, and that's what happens in chapter 1 through chapter 2, verse 7. Now, the little book by Hudson Taylor called Union and Communion is preeminently about the believer being united to Christ and communing with Him. You say, who's Hudson Taylor? Hudson Taylor was a missionary who in the 1850s God called and sent to China, and he became the first major missionary to that land of the world. And before Hudson Taylor died, he had taken with him 1,200 other Americans and Europeans, and they had missionaries in every province of China. And he did it all by prayer, all by faith, and all by on his knees. And what's interesting is a man that was known all around the world, a man that spoke in every major pulpit of Christendom, of the English-speaking world, and a man that was revered as a man of faith, only wrote one book in his whole life, and it was a little tiny, thin book on the Song of Solomon, and that was his life's work. And it's a beautiful book. And what he said this is about is the unsatisfied life and its remedy. And what he's talking about is this woman was not satisfied until she met the shepherd who was the king. And who is that? Christ, the good shepherd who is the King of Kings. And so we are basically living an unsatisfied life till we meet Him. And the unsatisfied longings of an espoused one, longings which could only be met by her unreserved surrender to the bridegroom of her soul. We find that when the surrender was made, instead of the cross, this one had so much feared, she found a king, the King of love, who both satisfied her deepest longings and found His satisfaction in her. And what a beautiful picture of redemption. Now, the first thing we see is that she talks about Him and she talks about herself. Look at chapter 1, verses 3 and 4, because it's very interesting. And I know there's all the wine and kissing and beauty and all this stuff, but remember, this is the backdrop. The whole imagery it's a very, very vivid image that we can all relate to. I mean, unless there's something wrong with you, sooner or later you can relate to love. I know that, when they're 10, 11, 12, they go, "Hey, girls," but boy, they get a little past that and it's, "Whoa, girls," and it just never ends. If, especially in God's providence, He says that you're to be fat and flourishing to the end of your days and intoxicated by your wife. So don't let all the gushy stuff mask the beautiful message underneath. Let me start in verse 1. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, and now the Shulamite speaks, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine." It's quite a statement in the Far East, or the Middle East, where it's so hot, where they're thirsty, where the water makes them sick, and wine was a real consolation. But listen to this. "Because of the fragrance of your good ointments, your name is ointment poured forth. Therefore the virgins love me, draw me away." So she's talking about herself and about Him. These are the two most interesting persons to a person who's in love. If someone's in love, who are the two people they're concerned about? They're one they love and themselves, and them and the one they love, and they're just, oh. You ever been around someone like that? It's just kind of a little thick. And they're just talking about them and taking pictures out and everything like that. There could be 1,000 people present, but the lovers have eyes only for each other. The Shulamite reminds herself of the magnificence of his presence. Now listen to different translations of that third verse. Here's what one says. "Because of the savor of the good ointments of thy name." It's as ointment poured forth. This is how Darby, the founder of the Plymouth Brethren, translates it. "Thine ointments savor sweetly. Thy name is like perfume poured forth." You ever been around a child that discovers a jar of perfume and they open it and they just put it on? I mean, you have to open the windows. It's so strong. It just fills the house or the car. It's worse if it's in the car. Well, this is what it's talking about, that the name of her beloved was like perfume poured out. Now listen, it's significant that God, for the most part, and especially in the Old Testament, revealed Himself to men and women and to young people by names. Elohim, Adonai, Jehovah, etc. Also, New Testament saints fell in love with those names, and in so doing, fell in love with Him of whom the name so eloquently spoke.